What if building strong math skills in your homeschooling didn't require fancy curriculum, complicated methods, or turning every lesson into a game? Today, I want to talk about what actually creates long-term math success. And it's probably much simpler than you think. Hey, homeschool mom, I'm Erika on the Intentional Homeschooler Podcast with more actionable steps and encouragement for your homeschooling journey so you can confidently and intentionally homeschool your children without sacrificing your sanity. Grab a pen and paper, your favorite cup of brew, and let's get started. First of all, strong math starts with strong foundations. All right, we want a strong foundation in most subjects, but I think in math it's really super important. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see homeschool parents make is feeling like they need to move quickly in math. We live in a culture that tends to equate acceleration with success. If a child is quote unquote ahead, we assume that they're doing well. But if they're quote unquote behind, we think they're not doing well. But math is cumulative. It builds on itself. So if the foundation is shaky, eventually things will start to wobble. I would rather see a student move a little bit more slowly with true understanding than to rush ahead with gaps. Eventually those gaps are going to show up. Fractions become difficult. Algebra will feel impossible, and then word problems become frustrating. And this isn't because a child just isn't good in math. It's because they never fully mastered the earlier building blocks. A strong math student is usually built through consistency and mastery, not by speed. All right, the second thing I want to talk about today is simple daily consistency, right? Kind of the boring stuff. The boring consistency matters more than some fancy methods that you come up with. So I think sometimes homeschool moms feel pressure to make math exciting all of the time. And listen, math can absolutely be enjoyable, and we can be creative in the way that we practice it, in the way that we teach it. But sitting down consistently and working through math step by step is where it is. Sometimes we will use games, and that's totally appropriate. And a lot of games just naturally use math anyway. Sometimes we will use manipulatives when they need to see the foundation, when they need to see the tangibility of math. And, we use those things to try to make learning engaging. So it's okay, though, when math doesn't feel magical every day. Sometimes it's just a to-do. Sometimes it's a stack of flashcards that our students need to get through every single day. Sometimes the greatest growth comes through ordinary consistency. It's a lot like going to the gym. I have been doing that now for about 1.5 years. It's a fairly new thing that I've been doing in my life. I've always been active with walking and hiking, but I just started to realize that I needed to get into the gym to build some muscle. And, I don't see the difference in one workout, right? It takes a lot of time. In fact, I've only been noticing my weights are getting heavier that I'm lifting, but I haven't really noticed a huge amount of difference in my body composition. I thought it was going to just magically change in a week. Well, 1.5 years later, I'm just now starting to see muscles where I didn't see muscles before. The same thing with math. You're not going to see an improvement in your children, so don't change. Just be consistent about some of those foundational facts and foundational, skills that need to be built. They will build. You might not see it quickly, but in the long run, you will begin to see it as they become more confident in it. And honestly, a calm, predictable math routine often helps children feel more secure and confident anyway, especially those who tend to feel anxious about math. Now, anxiety about math, we as parents can put that on our kids. Watch how you talk about math. Even if it's an anxious thing for you, it stresses you out, do your best to not put that on them, to not give them the idea that math is something to be anxious about. All right, number 3. Mastery before moving on. I think this is probably one of the most important things I'm going to talk about today. Don't be afraid to slow down. You're only behind if you keep telling yourself you're behind. Keep moving forward, but don't rush the process. Don't skip through those important foundations of math. If your child doesn't understand borrowing, regrouping, whatever you call it, multiplication facts or fractions or decimals yet, it's completely okay to pause, strengthen those skills before moving forward. And since you're homeschooling, you have a few kids. I don't know what your family has, but I had 4 at a time. You can see those gaps if you look closely at how your child is doing in their math. And you see a gap, you need to stop and you need to focus on that gap and make sure they learn those. For example, I know my girls, I remember they were struggling with multiplication facts. And so we kept going in the book, but we really highly focused on those multiplication facts. At the time, my mom was helping the kiddos with multiplication facts, as well as their grandpa Jim. He was there too, helping with those multiplication facts. And we gave up an award system that if they learned these certain facts by this time, they would get this reward. And that helped a lot because we knew we needed to pause. We knew we needed to be working on that specific skill, and the motivation really helped them a lot. And you know what? Review is not failure. Review is foundation building. So at Hope Learning Center, I've seen over and over again that students who are allowed to strengthen those weak areas, they eventually gain confidence quickly because the math will start making sense. The light bulbs start to come on, and it's so exciting to see our students, after they've taken that time to do a lot of review, maybe some one-on-one tutoring, they grow so much in their confidence for math. So a child who believes I can figure this out is in a very different place than a child who always feels defeated. So again, there's that mindset piece. You need to tell them that yes, they can learn this, and yes, they can do this. It is possible. All right, number 4, memorization and understanding work together. So there's almost a tension here between rote memorization and truly understanding. All right. You're not going to be in either. We don't want to be just memory work, and we don't want to be just understanding, right? We also can think of that as conceptual math versus procedural math. So you need procedures, but you also need to conceptually understand what those procedures are getting at and how we use those procedures in a conceptual way. So some people focus only on the memorization, they focus only on the procedures. Others will only focus on conceptual math. So we need both. We need a really good dose of both. We need to find that tension. Math facts matter, and it matters to be able to work through those formulaic ways of doing things. You know, being able to recall addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division facts, it frees up space mentally for the harder concepts later. So if they can just have those memorized and just they know they can work with numbers that way, they're not thinking about those computations. They're able to think about how to apply them to real life situations. So when a child has to painfully calculate every tiny fact problem, higher level math is too exhausting, right? They don't have the energy to work on those story problems or those concepts. Memorization isn't the enemy, it is a tool. We definitely want that conceptual understanding, though. We don't want them to just borrow numbers. We want them to see how they're regrouping the tens place, the hundreds place, the thousands place. They're moving them around, but there's a reason. It's not just this rote memorization to change this number down by one and move and put one in front of the one, and that's procedures, and if they're not understanding what they're doing, it's going to be much more difficult later. So remember, you don't have to choose between the two. You're not choosing between memorization versus understanding or conceptual math versus procedural math. You need both, right, in a good tension. So strong math foundations are usually built with both understanding and repetition working together. All right, number 5, structure creates confidence. So this is true in homeschooling overall, and you hear me talk about it all of the time, but I especially see it in math. Children feel more secure when math has structure. So you're doing it at a consistent time. There's a clear expectation, and they're making steady progress. So when students know what to expect, they're less emotionally overwhelmed by math. And honestly, moms often feel calmer too. You don't need to consistently reinvent the math lessons to be a good homeschool parent. Simplicity can be incredibly effective. Number 6, you do not need to be a math expert in order to teach math. So I want to encourage you, if you are feeling insecure about teaching math, I've got you. I remember coming across concepts that I hadn't seen in so many years and just feeling that stress rise, like, oh no, I don't know how to do this. And my kid's going to know that I don't know how, and they're not going to look at me as an authority, and it caused so much stress. But you guys, be honest when you don't know, and you should look ahead. Always be a few steps ahead of your student, especially elementary. When you're creating the foundation, be a few steps ahead, review, look up some videos. You're in the time where you can go to YouTube and you can search the topic. If you're trying to teach your children regrouping when adding or subtracting, look up some videos on how to teach students how to regroup, and you'll get some good ideas, and it will solidify your knowledge of it as well, because in order to explain it to somebody else, you have to understand it better before you can explain it, because you think you have it and then you start explaining it and you're like, wait, what? And you lose your thought or whatever. I actually just taught Algebra 1 at the Learning Center. I subbed for our teacher, and I've never really taught Algebra 1. I have a pretty good understanding of it myself, but when I went to teach it, I would start writing on the board and it was like it was out of my head. So take the time to review it and just be honest with your kids. When you don't get a concept, just pause and say, you know what, we're going to have to go back to that. Don't beat yourself up for not understanding. Homeschooling has never required perfection, all right? Structure, consistency are going to beat perfection every single time. All right, number 7, my last point that I want to make today is that real math success often looks boring before it looks impressive. It looks like the workbook that is filled out, that we got to the lessons, that we sat down and we did the work. I think this is something that we tend to forget. So by consistency, students will become strong math students after years of doing very ordinary things, practicing facts, reviewing concepts, working consistently, correcting those mistakes, and building their math foundations step by step. Strong foundations are usually built quietly, right? Going to the gym, building muscle is built quietly by showing up every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. I don't see the results. It's going to take a long time to truly see the results, but they are being built quietly and consistently. And that's encouraging because it means you don't need to do some magical curriculum or you don't need to have extraordinary talent to help your child succeed in math. You need intentionality, consistency, and the willingness to build slowly and steadily. So, if you want to build a strong math foundation at home, remember this. Slow down enough for mastery, stay consistent, review often, value both understanding and memorization, and don't underestimate the power of structure and confidence. Math success is usually built one faithful day at a time. Just like anything important, anything long-lasting is built one day at a time. And homeschool mom, you are far more capable than you think you are to teach your child math. And for those areas and when it gets out of your comfort zone, there are people who can help you. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Hope Learning Center. You can even reach out to YouTube to help you out. Use those things to help you out. So you want to homeschool, but you don't know where to start. Or you're already homeschooling and you just need a new perspective. I want to invite you to book a free coaching call with me. Sometimes you don't need to start over. You just need a little wind in your sails and a few new ideas. On that call, we will talk through homeschooling as a whole, whether you're new to homeschooling or as a seasoned homeschool mom. I will show you how my course, Charting Your Homeschool course, helps moms homeschool with clarity, confidence, and intention. You can book that free call in the show notes. Go do it today. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and right here where a brand new episode drops every other Thursday. Until next time, you've got this, Mom.